I don't think anyone has been super excited about Elemental. Maybe it's because last year's Disney Pixar entries were underwhelming, maybe the trailers just didn't sell it. And even though it did probably hurt it in marketing, I respect Pixar for continuing to not fixate on celebrity voice casting and picking relative unknowns who did really well in this. Still, Elemental probably isn't on many people's radar, and even I wasn't anticipating much from it. Which makes it a nice surprise that Elemental was actually pretty cute and even enjoyable. No, it's not Pixar top tier, I don't think anyone thought it would be, but it's sweet, it's visually interesting, and there's chemistry between the two leads, which is all I really needed it to do. But it is understandable if some still find it disappointing, as people usually expect Pixar to be narratively ambitious more than this is. But before we go any further, I need to thank this video's sponsor, HelloFresh. Do you love food but dislike food shopping? Do you want to practice cooking but you don't have the time to find the perfect recipe and dislike buying excessive amounts of ingredients that you're never gonna use again and eventually go bad in your fridge and ruin everything you've got inside of it? If so, HelloFresh's food delivery is worth checking out. HelloFresh sends you pre-portioned ingredients along with recipes that you can put together yourself, so you can cook something new and delicious without worrying about shopping for ingredients or worrying about leftovers of those ingredients. And if you don't have time to cook a full meal from scratch, HelloFresh does have quick and easy meals that can be made in under 15 minutes. My experience with HelloFresh's meals is that they are very delicious, its ingredients are easily marked, and its recipes are easy to follow. And also, sometimes I might just take ingredients and do whatever with them. Whatever, it's not mandatory. And with this system, HelloFresh is committed to staying green by cutting down on food waste and using recyclable materials. So if you want to make your life more delicious and convenient, as well as statistically more affordable and healthy than takeout, use my link or go to HelloFresh.com and use the code POGCELJUNE16 to get 16 free meals plus shipping. That's POGCELJUNE16 to get 16 free meals plus free shipping. For the few uninitiated, Elemental is about a city filled with sentient beings made of the elements, focusing around a family of fire people who are not even allegories for immigrants, they are literally in-universe immigrants, as the daughter Ember starts a relationship with Wade, a water person. And this is the most ordinary, grounded romance you've seen in a while. Everything about it is low drama and very practical. They meet by chance, they solve a minor crisis together, he asks her out, and they start going out. There's some family drama and 2 instances where they almost kill each other. Ordinary relationship stuff, I assume. Though the beginning of their relationship is a little rough. The start of the film settles the audience in by introducing us to Ember's family and her neighborhood and adjusting us to fire culture. And I was honestly so into that I was a little disappointed when Wade suddenly showed up, and it wasn't helped by the fact that the first 3 minutes of his screen time was him constantly crying, which is a thing with him. Now, part of it is because he's being reminded of his father's don't know how recent passing, but I was still kinda done with it pretty quickly. Thankfully, he's not like that the entire time and proves himself to be a very sincere and caring person. And the way that the two of them are very interested in each other's abilities and worlds is very endearing. In general, it just has that grounded wholesomeness that Pixar usually embodies, even the lesser ones. Otherwise a Pixar constant, the film looks fantastic. It's colorful, it's creative, the details of an elemental city have a lot of really clever ideas. Now, one thing I'm not sure if I've ever told you Animaniacs is that I do have a family friend that used to work at Pixar back in the Bugs Life days, and they were super impressed with the way that they did the character models and how difficult it must have been for have the characters be constantly shifting shapes, which is very Pixar, to take an animation challenge and turn that into the basis of a film. There's a lot of creative flexibility in how the characters move, how they interact with their environment. I noted earlier that one of my biggest concerns was whether or not characters that were literally fluid and basically jiggling for an hour would eventually become too disorienting, but you do adjust to it and it still works. It really is a stunning looking film and it absolutely deserves to be seen in theaters. There was also the thought about whether or not this entire concept maybe would have been better as a short film, which is still probably true. Many probably would have preferred this to be a short and to have Paperman be a feature. But speaking of short, we get one in front of this Pixar film with a episode of Carl and Doug. Always glad to see Pixar doing shorts. But let's cut to the big things everyone is going to be fixating on. No, the elemental world they've created doesn't really make sense if you think about it longer than 5 minutes. But honestly, I don't know why people need it to make sense. I have never understood how such a large amount of people could be fixated on the world building of the Cars universe, if only because who exactly is invested in cars that much? Except for that one guy who made a pretty good pro-Cars movie video essay. But for all of the people that got worked up over Cars, Elemental is going to have the same problems times 10. The only way it feasibly works is if the elements in this world don't work on the same laws of physics as our world, which, it is already the case because in our world, elements aren't sentient. So, checkmate. I have already nullified all of your complaints. But the more discussion-worthy topic is having another movie with non-human fantastical characters trying to replicate a real-world issue like prejudice. Much like Zootopia, whose race allegory gets a little uncomfortable at the prospect that the predators are discriminated against, but there is actual historical precedent that they are in fact dangerous, contrasting with real-world bigotry that operates on blaming everyone in a group for the behavior of minority / fabricating bullshit to justify hatred. It makes a fantasy race that is so obviously potentially dangerous that seems to work against the point that it's trying to make. Even though Zootopia overall is still pretty good, you'd think that Disney would have learned maybe not to do that again, and then they did it again with zombies. Which is why out of all of them, Beastars is the one that actually kinda works, because it's not trying to merely imitate the prejudice issues in our own world, it's focusing on the dynamic of the world that it has created for itself by not shying away from the predator-prey dynamic. But however, I think what they did here is a little bit more nuanced because part of the point is that fire is supposed to seem like the obvious outlier.
Yeah, fire's everyone's weakness. It's f***ing fire.
In actuality, the only material fire is definitely damaging against is leaves. Not even the earth people themselves, because their bodies are made out of dirt, which doesn't catch fire as easily as wood or leaves, which is more like their hair. And sure, getting your hair burned off is certainly annoying, but in terms of whether or not they're dangerous to the people, because if they're in contact with too much water, they straight up lose giant gaps of their body if it's not replenished quickly by eating wood. And they are in a city that is like 50% waterways. They are in genuine danger of being extinguished if they step out of their neighborhood.
The city isn't made with fire people in mind.
In fact, the incident that starts this film is when the water pipes in the fire neighborhood that were supposed to be shut down, but the officials haven't done anything yet. So it basically is the equivalent of a deadly gas leak. You can even make the connection, depending on the situation, that the fire people can even represent neurodivergent or disabled people as those who need additional accommodations to enter certain spaces that are literally hostile to them. Ember goes to Wade's family's penthouse, and it's genuinely terrifying.
You die if you fall in water?
And there are some other subtle details involving class and immigration that I also think is clever. Like, one of my favorite details is when Wade eats the fire nuts, and then suggests that they could actually be delicious and less painful if he watered them down into what is basically tea, which obviously the fire people find offensive, but that's probably one of the best examples of showcasing the benefit of cultural fusion. When you create something new out of different techniques and materials and backgrounds. Say what you will about Americanized ethnic food, but itself has its own unique history and reasons for why it ended up the way it did. I just wanted to point at least a couple of positive ways to look at it, as I know every single review is probably going to be bombarded with how much the metaphor doesn't work. My biggest issue with the film is that the plot is just kinda basic. If you wanted to play the Pixar or romantic comedy tropes and cliches, you can make a very decent list. Even if they're cute, Ember and Wade are very rom-com stock. Ember's a work-oriented tsundere with family baggage. Wade's a goofball that means well, but because he's willing to put in more effort, he thinks that means Ember should be keeping pace with him and needs to calm down a little bit. I also think it's easy to think of missed opportunities where they could have explored this world further. And my guess is that they realized that focusing too much on elemental division was kind of a bummer, so they just focused more on the couple as the emotional center of the film, which was probably a smart move. And I don't know how much of that is a factor of Elemental's screenwriters being TV sitcom people. Now, granted, John Hoberg and Kat Lickle are a married couple and very long-time experienced showrunners, and along with the producer of How I Met Your Mother, maybe they believe that they were the people to do a romantic comedy. But it's not always called for, but for me, a little warning light usually goes off when the top creative people of an animated film are not animation people. And in this case, not even movie people. Maybe that's why the script feels a little more formulaic. And the director Peter Sohn has only directed The Good Dinosaur, which I do think gets a little bit too much flack, but also understandable why most of the time people just don't remember it exists, but Elemental is certainly an improvement. And because I know it's coming, I think people are a little too quick to cast something else as yet another generational trauma story, where I guess just any conflict between parents and children is generational trauma. I think generally it's a good move to have family-oriented conflict in family-oriented stories. But I do agree that the specific conflict of what do my parents want me to do versus what I want to do has gotten a bit repetitive. So no, it's not a Pixar masterpiece, but it's interesting premise, it's impressive animation, and it's intriguing, if not very believable or consistent world. And most importantly, its character work and emotional sincerity keeps it engaging and likable. This is a B-tier Pixar film. I would certainly put it above some of their recent sequels. I just want you to keep that in mind, as the only news you're gonna get about Elemental in the next week is how it's Pixar's worst opening weekend. Only a little under Onward, but yeah, it's bad. And that's compounded by a lot of factors. But you know what's just as sad? This is still technically the biggest animation opening of a purely original animated film since the pandemic, if you don't count Encanto's full 5-day Thanksgiving total. But yeah, that's basically true. As much as I am thrilled that so far the two biggest films of 23 are animated ones, they are also technically both franchises and/or lean heavy on nostalgia. Ruby Gillman Teenage Kraken is tracking to make $8 million for its entire opening weekend. And last year, Bad Guys opened to 23 and domestically didn't break 100. Last Wish opened with 12, same as Strange World, which is exactly the point. A film's opening is not unimportant, but it's primarily a reflection of the film's hype. The film's ability to hold in later weekends is truly reflective of the film's quality. Original films take time to build audiences, but the current industry just isn't patient enough for that. Like, if you're comparing every single summer movie weekend to weekend, all of you are missing the most important box office news, which is that Spider-Verse is continuing to kick everyone's ass. But it is also fair to point out that this isn't just a matter of franchises versus originals. Because my frequent beaten dead horse is how a lot of major studio animation is just boring to me a lot of the time. They tend to go for the same wells over and over again, and Pixar and Disney are certainly not immune from that. It's definitely not that these films are terrible, but are they worth how expensive theaters have gotten? Elemental is, and will continue to get, a lot of shit that it doesn't deserve, but chances are it's not gonna rock many people's world either. As said, I do understand people's less than enthusiasm for it. So while I'm clearly an overcompensating protector myself, don't go digitally throwing stones at people merely for saying they're just not interested. I would just say to give it a chance if you're on the fence. But yes, this is particularly bad, both because this movie was expensive and how Pixar's name has lost a lot of confidence. Even if Elemental manages to pick up some good word of mouth, I don't expect it's going to make the money that Disney needs it to. My minimal hope is that maybe this can make more than Lightyear, which is why the worst thing that Disney can do right now is run away and go back to its 30 days till plus strategy, which is the main reason we're in this mess. Especially because Pixar's next film, Elio, looks really adorable, as well as original, and I really want it to be in theaters. But even with all this, is it not just a little bit funny that the Pixar movie with the rage-inducing lesbian kiss made almost twice as much on opening? Clearly what Elemental needed was more lesbians. And at least this time, the one movie of the summer making the biggest amount of money is because it genuinely deserves it. In the meantime, we got Teenage Kraken, we got Nimona, we got Mutant Mayhem, and we got Venture Brothers. The summer is not over yet.